Janky had to go in the other room. Can't do an interview with me in the same room.
Yay!
Hey!
Yay! I'm
How's
the
it
one that always
going?
yells, yay. So somebody had to do it.
He's got to yell yay for himself.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Wonderful. A really great angle for myself here.
I think it's flattering.
Thank you. I'm very handsome. Hey, buddy, how are you?
I'm okay. So for those of us who don't know who you are, could you introduce yourself?
I'm Chris, Janky Toys. I make toys, paintings, and I help Doug produce DKECON.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! Hey. I didn't have my air horn ready.
Oh, you have to get your own air horn. Isn't it great being your own cheerleader? I feel like I have to be my own cheerleader in life. The rest of my life, except for DKECON, because then Janky's there to like.
Because then I can hear you.
But actually, when you used to announce people, when I watched back all the interviews from our first show a year ago.
Oh, we did. I forgot. I did the Comic-Con announcements, huh?
Yeah, you had the microphone, and for some reason it was echoing in the room, and it just sounded like.
Ladies and gentlemen, coming to the stage.
It just sounded really magical.
We make magic, though.
Yeah. So the first time I heard of Janky Toys, I don't even think I knew your name. Am I correct? You and your wife were going around the valley here and leaving found pieces of art?
Yeah, hiding it. We went to a friend's wedding in Georgia, 2011, 2012-ish, and there's a big scene in Atlanta called Free Art Friday Atlanta, or FAFATL. You can look it up on Instagram. And there's like 40 or 50 artists who just hide these little pieces of art around the city and give clues, and then it turns into this giant art hunt. And people are running around the city trying to find stuff, and we thought that was amazing. So when we came back to LA, we started making little pieces. My wife's an incredible photographer, so she would take these landscape pictures of LA, and then I would paint these UFOs blowing up the city and on these little wood panels, and we would hide them all over the place. So
then you did one that was Star Wars, right? Then you did like a little thing of blue milk.
Yeah, so for May the 4th, whatever year that was, probably 2012, 2013, I took a spray paint cap and filled it with blue resin or something, or silicone or something that was sitting around from a project, like a house repair project, and hid blue milk. And I think George Gaspar found it.
He found it and he gave it to me. And I'm like, there's this dude and his wife, and they're just going around the valley, like hiding artwork. And I found this for you. And I was like, dope. This is cute. Like, I don't know. It was like, you found this? Like, who's crazy enough to drive around, San Fernando Valley and just start leaving this stuff on places? Like,
giving crap away. Yeah.
Crazy.
We had like, I mean, there was a point, it didn't really catch on in LA like it did in Atlanta, but there was probably 10 artists at one point. And we were doing art swaps where I'd get boxes from Atlanta and we'd send boxes to Atlanta. And so there was sort of art from across the country being hidden all over LA and all over like Atlanta and
LA is a little too big and spread out to really.
Yeah. And I think people don't, like, we kind of stopped doing it. I mean, this directly led into me becoming Janky Toys, but we kind of stopped doing it because you put it out there and 2/3 of the pieces, no one ever responds that they found them. So you wonder, like, did a janitor find it and throw it away? Did like someone take it and they framed it? Like, you don't know what happens with the art. And
right.
So there's a little bit of learning and like letting go, but it's like, I made this thing and I'm just putting it in the world and I don't care what happens, but you also sort of want to know what happens. So eventually we tailed off of doing it a little bit.
And how are they supposed to let you know that they found it?
So on each piece, on the back of each piece, there's the Instagram handle and it says, please tag us and whatever. And I also think people probably picked it up and thought it was some weird advertising hoax or a con or something and just wouldn't respond.
Yeah, unless you actually tell people like, you found an original piece of art.
We did. It would say, look, you found this, finders keepers, it's yours, this piece of art. Like, please tag the artist here. And some people did it, but a lot. But
that's kind of a generational issue. Like, if someone over 60 found it, they'd be like, cool, but they're not going to know how to tag you on Instagram.
I also imagine like someone over 60 is going to see my weird little painting of a UFO blowing up the Hollywood sign and be like, yeah, I'm leaving that there. I don't know what this is. So it was
So
fun. I mean, we had a lot of fun doing it.
so that led you to be Janky Toys. How did you find resin toys?
So I I mean, through the suck lord, like everybody else. I was a fan of the Work of Art TV show, and had actually read an article about him, I think leading up to his season, and was like, holy crap, that's awesome. And we had just started playing with like wood cuts. So we, at one point when we were doing the hidden art, we found a Christmas or a tree in North Hollywood, and we put lights around it for Christmas, and we made like 20 little woodcut UFO ornaments, and we're hanging them in the tree. So I was starting to mess around with 3D things as opposed to just 2D painted art. So, and then obviously watching Work of Art, like I was like, oh my God, who's this guy? And what's this incredible thing that he's doing with Sucklord stuff? And so that led me to Designer Con, I think it was 2013. So we were hiding the art pieces, and I went for one day on Designer Con 2013, and that was the year Sucklord did the game show. And I ended up getting called on stage and embarrassing myself several times and getting these Sucklord pieces.
That was the year after this?
Yeah, because I think the Suckathon was, yeah, that
this
was the
this was 2011.
Okay.
2012 was sort of a boring version up on the stage, which was terrible. So 11, 12, so it must have been 2013.
Yeah, which is when like Paul Kaiju's having people like swing monkey nuts around, and I had to take my shirt off and jiggle around while people threw things at me like a basketball, and there was a twerking contest. It was a whole thing. Yeah, the Suck Up 2 was that year.
I remember we produced that.
Thank you for producing my fat ass shaking around.
We had the Suck Carnival, and then we bought with Billions McMillions doing the music. It was on the DJ, and then we found it was like I had to go find it. It was probably like $80. I had to find that the Bob Barker telescoping
the long microphone
for,
and that's where the couch came from. The psychedelic couch was made for that.
No, I think the Suck couch
was that for that one.
No, I think that was back in. Oh, you're right. Like we didn't. You're right, because
I just remember it being this like big deal.
Well, do you see that couch right there?
Is that your
black
house now?
That black couch? No, you're staring at it in the office right there.
That's what. Oh, okay. Scott's sitting on part of that.
Yeah. So
the stories that couch can tell.
Yeah, really. I forget that couch originally belonged to my buddy Jerry Duggan, who got that couch from that other comedian. I forgot his name. There's a
Jerry Duggan of Deadpool comic book fame.
Yes.
Yeah, that guy's awesome.
So he used to rent. When I first moved into my house 20 years ago, no one was living there because it's still being worked on, and I rented him a room. He was sort of watching the place, and he got his first writing job was with what's that comedian's name?
Brian Posehn.
Brian Posehn. That was Brian
Posehn's the Santa Claus comic book.
Yeah, so it's Brian Posehn's couch and he had another roommate. And I remember I have two pieces of it, right? And then I was bugging him when I moved it to the other warehouse because I wanted the corner piece. And someone's ass is sitting on the corner piece right now as we speak, Mr. Chair.
Couch of rage.
And we keep threatening to get rid of that couch, but it's brought us good luck. Okay, enough about the couch. So yes, the Suckathon couch.
Yeah.
Suckathon couch. Yes. That was
so
the year
that was like a transcendent day for me. Like that was one of those like pinpoint these days that alter the course of your life. That was one of them, because I walked away from that saying I want to do this. I think I put out my first figure, which is terrible, in January 2014, and it was like, your low entry point of I cast a dinosaur head and put it on a starting lineup hockey figure and gave it to my friend who is a big Buffalo Sabres. But it's the first Janky Toys piece. I painted this crappy like smeary card back.
Nice.
And then I got some cruddy like pulled putty silicone from Michaels and started making molds of my favorite Transformer, who's Cosmos the UFO. And so I started casting these little Cosmos figures, and that became what I started hiding around the city. So we went from doing these postcards where the UFOs were blowing up the city to these little molded, I call them saucers of the Southland. And so those are
Nice.
sort of the first Janky toys that went out into the world.
And then I think the first time you registered on my radar, and then I put two and two together that you were the guy hiding stuff around the valley, um, were the limbs.
Yeah, the severed limbs, which
The
actually was another hiding piece where it was an art show in Atlanta where they were doing a Star Wars art show for May the 4th. And so I made one set of a Wampa and a Ponda Baba that went to Atlanta, and one set of a Wampa and a Ponda Baba that I hid in LA. And people were really responding to them when I was posting the teasers of them, and really responding. Like I had like, I don't know, 150 followers, so like 15 likes is really responding. But people were really into them. So I said, well, maybe I could make these. So I decided to do severed limbs and make the first 6, which was Ponda Baba, Wampa, Count Dooku, C-3PO, Darth Vader. Who am I missing? Oh, and Darth Maul's legs. And so I put those up thinking I'd sell like 5, and I sold close to 300.
Wow.
I didn't know to put caps on the limits. I didn't know what I was doing. I was like learning as I went. So that was my entire like summer and fall, was making these severed limb figures that went out. All because I hid these dumb little pieces on the street. And I got a message from Sarah Jo, who I didn't know at that point, or you, who I didn't know at that point, saying, my husband saw these on Instagram. He would like to buy them. And I'm like,
Yeah, that was before I had an Instagram account.
Yeah.
And then I had to have a proxy, like go and contact people for me. Like, honey, can you contact this person and see if I can get this Garbage Pail Kid sticker? It's like, all right.
Your buyer. Yeah. You bought 2 sets, I think. So I don't know who got the second one. I have an idea of who got the second one, but I'm not positive who got the second one.
I think at the time, Dave Mandel gave me a standing order.
Right.
He just said, whatever you buy for yourself, get for me too.
Get me one. Yeah, that was because I remember you mentioning Steve Sansweet, but he actually bought a set for me himself. So yeah. So I think it was Dave.
Steve like sort of picks and chooses, and Dave for like 2 or 3 years. I don't know what he thought, because he was just getting. Now it did help me. I didn't make any money doing it. I wasn't doing it for the money, but it did give me some buying power. It did save on shipping. Sometimes I could negotiate because I was buying 2 of everything. But what it did get for me is, time is the issue, right? So it's, people know you want 2 of everything. It just, they think of you. They're like, right. Oh, I better ask Dove, do you want 2 of these? And I just, yes, okay. Right. The PayPal invoice would show up. Yeah, I sort of blew him up. Like, I think he lasted like 1.5 years, 2 years. He was like, okay, that's it. I'm just gonna pick and choose.
This is enough. I've got too many goddamn Star Wars limbs.
And then people sort of took it personally. How come you're only buying 1? You used to buy 2 of everything. I'm like, well, and then at some point he sold me back a box or 2 of stuff that he didn't want, and then that stuff would be like in the booth, like behind, and then people were like, right. Why are you selling the stuff I sold you? I'm like, I still have the piece I got from you. Don't worry. Yeah. Like,
everybody's very sensitive. I mean, I understand. These are your little resin babies.
Sure. So let's talk about that first DKECON year. Like you said, it was sort of like a watershed moment from you. Like, what was it? DKECON, Designer Con, and the people that were there selling stuff that had that influence, or was it actually? I mean, I know that the show was memorable and people like, trying to fillet carrots and do whatever what was it with ET? I still have the art here. Greg Mishka did the ET art, and there was the turkey baster, and someone was sitting in the kiddie pool. It was like,
and there were children walking by the stage, and it was a whole thing.
Yeah, we had the sign. There's a sign next to you on the floor over there. It says "Suck on" right there. It's like,
right,
for adults only. And yeah, the next year people asked to be very far away from the suck on.
But it wasn't like that was really fun for me, and that was a great introduction. But there's an energy about DKECON, and it's changed a little bit as DKECON's grown. As it's supposed to. As it's become a more successful show, it needs to grow and evolve. But there was sort of this very raw creator energy for those 13, 14, 15 into 16, sort of before it moved to Anaheim. Actually, before it spread out to the other building, right. in Pasadena. And I think I was looking for that. I've always been creative, but I was always a performer. Like I sang and was a music major for a year, and then I've been into movies and filmmaking my whole life. So I went and became a film major, and then I moved to LA to be an editor, and I had an 18 long year career as a film and television editor. And so I've always been creative, but I've never produced art. And my mom is an incredible watercolor painter, and she was an art teacher my whole life. And I think I can't draw. So I think I always just sort of like, well, if I can't draw, I can't do art. And so I never did it. And she would always encourage me, and I would never do it. And then I started, this is backtracking a little bit, but I just randomly started painting in like 2008 maybe. And I loved it. I fell in love with it. And there's this whole new creative energy I didn't have anymore, because I loved filmmaking and I wanted to be an editor, and that was my passion. But as soon as it became my job, that passion got a lot more complicated. Yeah, exactly. Yes. So painting sort of filled that hole. And then when I went to DKECON, my love of pop culture and my love of toys, I wasn't a toy collector as a kid, but I had tons and I played with them. I loved them. They were, and then in college, like I sold all my Star Wars toys to my cousin and then regretted it in college, and he wouldn't sell them back to me. And that was right around the time that Power of the Force 2 came out. And so I went nuts on Power of the Force 2 because I was buying all the pieces I had lost. And then I genuinely love those figures because of how insane they are, because of how bulky and weird. But when I was a kid playing Star Wars, as much as I loved the vintage design, they weren't gangly and lanky. In my head, Luke is like this powerful Jedi, and Darth Vader is this menacing figure. And I didn't think Princess Leia looked like a monkey, but still, like in my head, the Power of the Force 2 is how these characters sort of existed. So I like these over-exaggerated, super bizarro interpretations, and that brought me back into sort of the collector's mindset. So now jump ahead to DKECON, where I've got this new creative need, and I'm in this room full of artists who are so passionate, and all of them are so friendly and want to talk. Like I, had a conversation with Alex Pardee and was blown away that Alex Pardee would just sit there and talk to me for 20 minutes. These artists I really loved their work and admired were right there and telling me to go make shit. So I went and made shit. So, but I also, like, I met a couple people. There's a guy named Drew Toes who goes by unaffiliated SD, who makes these incredible kaiju resin figures. And he and I got to be friends because of DKECON, because we were both there for the suckathon and both there, and we sort of found each other on Instagram. He's the one that taught me how to build a pressure pot. He introduced me to, like ETC and Dollar Slice, because they all sort of shared a booth at DKECON, the next year. And so I sort of met a lot of these people through him. So it's sort of the friendships I sort of made there that kind of tracked me on that path. And it was shortly after that you find Sucklord, and then I found Healy. Killer wasn't quite on my radar yet. I don't know why Killer didn't quite register on my radar until a little bit later. But Falcon and Credenda were the two guys that I saw their work, and I was like, this is what I want to do. And I think Falcon, because he puts this humor in his work that I wasn't seeing a lot of, and I put a lot of humor into everything I do. And his execution is incredible. And then Credenda just had these graphic design cards and figures that looked so cool. He did one of Frank N. Stein, which is Frankenstein goes into the witness protection program. And so it's this awesome Frankenstein figure on this gorgeous card, but it comes with a file folder that has his entire witness protection history in the file folder. And that like blew my mind at the time. I was like, oh God, look at what you could do with this medium. Like,
right.
There's no limit to what you can do. And so that at that point I was sort of, between their ideas and then Severed Limbs blowing up. Severed Limbs got featured on The Nerdist, which is why I sold so many of them. So it sort of blew up from that. So between those two things, I was like, well, here's my lane. Guess I'm driving this.
The interesting thing about DKECON is I still think it has all of those qualities. I think because it has become a real business and no longer a charity that Ben is, putting out,
right.
For the benefit of everybody else. As booth prices went up, I think that we did some it was, there's less of like an experimental
Right.
feel to it. Like when a booth was a couple $100, like you could afford to, you know, I remember showing up and having Dane, just Buzzard Gus, just open up his suitcase and just pull out all of this stuff, and it was like, what's going on here?
What is
like,
this? Yeah.
you know, this guy who's like, looks like he was like living in a cave, just showed up here with,
and might have been, let's be fair, like,
with a suitcase just full of these one-of-a-kind toys I've never seen before. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I don't think that could happen again today, because, you know, as a booth price is approaching, you know, $800 or $1,000, I think you have to have a, you know, it's a gamble, right? Every time you put out a piece of work, it's a gamble. You know, who was talking about that the other day? I don't know, but you know, every time we decide to make something, it's a gamble, right? Every time you decide to put your time and energy into one project, you are placing a bet. And I think most people trying to hedge their bets are not going to show up at DKECON to start with until they have some idea that they're going to, you know, try and recoup their money. And if you're local, it's easier, because it's just the cost of the booth and parking, and you can drive home and make your own food. But if you have to travel,
it's a totally different,
and you have to get your stuff out here, and you have to stay in a hotel or Airbnb, and you're eating at restaurants all the time, like your cost goes up exponentially. Like it just becomes very, very difficult. So
I did DKECON as a vendor for the first time in 2014. I think I was like, I'm all in on this, let's do it. And I think a booth was like $150 or $200 at that point. So at that point, it was the show where you just go set up to get discovered. And I did 3 or 4 DKECONs. The first one, I made a ton of money. I mean, just did relatively, but I did really, really well. And the second one, I still made good money, but not as much. And the third one, I broke even. And the fourth one, we lost money. So, and we could just see the trajectory the show was going. And again, it's growing the way that type of show is going to grow. And I'm really happy for DKECON, and I'm happy for Ben, because I think he sort of wanted it to be a little bit of a different show, right? He's got it focused on bigger brands, and you get Metacom involved, and it becomes a whole new thing. And Funko got involved for a minute, and that was a whole new thing. And, you know, so it starts becoming, when you get those convention exclusives that are not artist made, it starts becoming more about the exclusive and less about let's discover these weird artists, which is a bummer for the weird artists, but it's good for the show. But I wouldn't now, like, I don't want to set up a DKECON anymore, A, because it's just too expensive, and B, because now I enjoy, it's the family reunion for me. I'd rather walk around and say hi to everybody and high five my friends than I would set up a booth and be stuck there all day. And, you know, if it was a lower price point booth and a show where you're meant to get discovered, then maybe I would set up again. But I still love DKECON. It's still my favorite show of the year. It's just a different show than it was. So
true. So where did we first meet? I don't even remember.
We met for the first time at the Dispersed warehouse when I brought your order of severed limbs to you.
That was the first time?
I think
because in my mind, Janky has always just existed.
I incepted myself into your life.
I do not, you know, this is like some Matrix shit, because I do not remember the time where like you appeared and became like a first impression. It just, Janky has just always been there.
Yeah. Oh, to be fair, you're sort of like that with us too. It's like, oh yeah, duh. I grew up with you. I didn't. I've only known you for 7 years.
Like if someone told me that I knew you for 20 years, I'd be like, okay, yeah, that sounds right. Like I just I don't know.
Yeah.
So you came to the warehouse to drop off. Okay.
The severed limbs that you had ordered. I'm pretty sure that was the first time. And then we talked about, so that would have been 2015 probably. I'm sure we met at booths. In fact, I'm positive we had met, but we just didn't, like, because
you came to the Dispersed warehouse would have been 2016 on.
Okay, so maybe it was 16.
So before,
whenever I did, yeah.
Had I already sold to Dispersed?
I don't know. Or maybe it would. maybe it was still the DKE warehouse, but it was in the same spot, right? The same location.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. So it was probably still the DKE warehouse at that point.
I see.
But I'm sure we met at booths because I bought that Mike Egan painting from you in 2014 or 13, whenever Phantom Star Killer came out. That was the same year as the Mike Egan show.
2013.
13. So I'm sure we had met, but never.
This one. Right.
Yeah. But never connected. And at that point, I wasn't putting stuff out actively.
Right.
And a lot of 2014 for me was doing the Officers of the Southland. So that was still hiding free art around. It wasn't until really 2015 that I think I started selling stuff with the Severed Limbs. So it would have been like 2015 probably that we met.
And so can we talk about your career as an editor? Like you said, it's something that you did and that you really enjoyed, and then it became a job. And
yeah, so I mean, I've always loved filmmaking. I wanted to be a director until I started directing and realized I hate it. And then I discovered editing, which is putting the pieces together, which is what I actually love. I like, and I also think, there's a fun set of problems to solve as an editor because you're trying to find the right story. But I also think, aside from the director, the editor is the person that crafts the story the most. The editor really takes every single piece and either makes it work or not. And I love that set of problems, and I love that challenge of storytelling. Storytelling is like the key thing in my life, I think. So, and so that's what I wanted to do. And I came out here and I had a really good career. But you come out here to work with Spielberg and you end up working on like a Bachelor knockoff where they've got half of the contestants are straight and half of the contestants are gay, and the main girl has to figure out who's straight and who's gay. And I was like, this is my life. Like, this is what I'm doing from 7 o'clock at night until 5 in the morning when my shift ends every day. And I still loved it, but it's long hours. It was very common for me to work 70, 80 hours a week. The pay is, I mean, I can't complain. It pays well, but as soon as the show's over, There's no backup. There's no thanks for the work. It's okay, the show's done. This is your last day. You have no warning.
Right.
And I did that for a long time. And it got to a point where I couldn't do it anymore. I felt like I wasn't getting anything from it. The industry is getting harder and harder as rates are going down for shows and budgets are changing. And what used to be a 5 or 6 editor show is now a 3 editor show, and you're still expected to finish everything in the exact same time frame that 5 or 6 editors would. I just didn't love it anymore. There was no creative juice. The same set of problems that used to get me really fired up now just felt like a cage. So I decided to start looking for a way out. And I did. Now I work for an accounting firm, which is the opposite of what I was doing.
Wow.
I have never felt more creatively free because I have all this energy to think about other things,
Right. Well, I mean, you've heard me talk about on this show like many times. Like I always use the example of this buddy of mine in school who wanted to be a writer, and I'd say like, hey, I showed him this thing, like you can get this job, like doing this, and he was like, no. He's like, if I do that job during the day, I will not come home at night and write my own stuff.
Right.
And
like, I put out a comic book in 2012 called Dames in the Atomic Age. It's an independent comic book. It was put out by an independent producer. It did really well for an indie book. It was the Diamond Select Feature of the Month that month. And there was a TV show deal at one point, which fell through because that's what happens to TV deals. But it took me a year to write that book because I was editing all day. And I'd come home and the same muscle you use to write is the muscle you use to edit. And I was just exhausted and I didn't want to do it. And the book, there was a contract for 4 and it didn't end up going past the first one for various reasons, including the publisher decided they didn't want to publish anymore. But it was sort of that same thing. It was like, I love this until I had to do it as a thing. And then it's harder to do.
I think that happens to a lot of creative people. It's like, you like the idea of it. I mean, my issue is that I'm not a process person.
Right.
I do not love the process. I love the general idea of looking back at your accomplishment and saying, hey, I did this, or a group of accomplishment. But the idea of sitting and trolling through and getting your hands dirty and doing the hard work day in and day out, that's just grueling and mind numbing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, when I see these painters, these artists out there who sit and paint, Robert Burden, for example, it just will spend 2,000 hours on a painting. Like I can't do anything for 2,000 hours.
No, I would be so bored like 15 minutes in. Yeah. As I'm going through business stuff, I have zero business background, so I don't know why the CPA firm hired me. But trust your taxes. I'm not doing tax work, by the way. I'm actually doing more. We're focused on small business development, so I'm doing more like it's a lot of internal work. It's a lot of work with people, which I actually really like. But these concepts are being introduced to me, these business concepts. So there's like the concept of the visionary, the implementer, and the actuator. We'll call it actuator. I don't remember the one who brings it to life. So the visionary loves the process of coming up with things and is often scattered because they've got 200 things. So it's like your Bill Gatesy type guy. But then the implementer is the person that creates the system in which it happens, but is not necessarily the person that does it themselves. That's the actuator. That's the person who brings it to life. And you rarely get all three in one package. So you end up having to build a team to combine all of these things. So, and I always thought I was the visionary. Like was always what I figured I was. And my boss has led me to this interesting revelation that I'm actually the implementer, where I'm great at the ideas, but what I love doing is building the system to get it to go. I just don't want to do it myself.
Right.
So I need an actuator to do it myself, which is why I haven't released a toy in 2 years, because I've got all these great ideas and this is how I'm going to do it, but I just have to force myself to sit down and do it, So look at all these things I'm learning about myself by getting a big boy corporate job.
Really? I mean, you're getting all of this from your corporate job?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I've learned more from this job. Like, I know everybody talks about, I want to quit my job and be creative, and I think that's awesome. Everybody has their own track.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought my track was. But I think it actually turns out my track is not to do that. If I put all of my energy, my creative energy, to somebody else's work, which is what I was doing in television, I'm never going to do anything for myself.
Right.
So now I have this other job I actually like and care about, but it has nothing to do with me, and it has nothing to do with my creative side, and or at least in the physical manifestation, making paintings and figures. And now I'm like, oh, I've got all these ideas that I didn't have before. I've got all this stuff I want to do that I don't know. I'm so much happier that I don't have a creative job, which is insane to me. But that was the path that I'm on.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is not what I expected to hear out of this interview.
Yeah, I'm an enigma, man.
No, I mean, it makes sense. We always talk about on these interviews about how painful, being a creator is.
Yeah.
And I always go back to that statement. It's like, if you can be happy doing anything else that's not creative, then you should be doing it. Yeah. Or if you can find creativity in your daily life, that only the people who, and Scott and I have had this conversation over and over again, like when he calls me saying, like, why am I doing this?
Yeah, we've had that conversation a handful of times ourselves.
Yeah. I would like to be able to just come up with the idea and then someone else to come up with a system. And actually, like when I think about putting out a book, right, the idea, it's like, I have the idea, I know how to sell it. It's the in-between work that I just find so painful.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, I talk about this all the time. Now that Spencer, who's coming up next, has been carding a lot of the figures for us, we've actually been able to, in the past month, get a lot of stuff done in-house here that is pushing us closer to getting to these projects, because and that was part of changing up our schedule to March, July, November, because basically when I got to the second half of the year with 3 shows in 5 months, like nothing happened. And that's always been my struggle is having this one big project that you want to do. Oh, but I need to pay bills today. Oh,
Right.
but I need to deal with this
Yeah.
today. And so all the writing teachers would say, like, you wake up in the morning, you write, or
Before
like
the
in my
world dumps
case,
on you. Yeah, it's your magic morning theory. Yeah.
you work on the big project or whatever it is, and then you go deal with the mundane. And
Right.
man, dude, I can't, unless the mundane is handled, I can't focus on like, oh, I need to call this person, I need to do this, I need, it's like I keep telling
Right.
myself like an idiot, like every day I'm going to do this, and then at the end of the day I'm going to do this one project that's going to take 2 hours, and it's like, man, it's 7 o'clock. Should I work here till 9? No, I'll go
Well,
home.
and
I'll do it tomorrow.
yeah, and like this is sort of what I'm learning with all of this stuff is one of the hardest things for the visionary to do, which is you, is to delegate. So you have to have a implementer who takes that stuff off of your plate for you and delegates it, because you have these visions, you have these thoughts, but it's hard to let go of the actual action of doing it. But the implementer has to have an actuator who can do that work as well. So Ian is your implementer. You have to give him the work, and he has to have an actuator to take care of it.
That presupposes that you have, an infinite amount of resources to hire, this creative staff to be able to.
But you figured it out here with, so the problem was you want to work on the thing, these things need to be carded. Mm-hmm. So Ian is in charge of making sure they get carded, and you've got someone coming in to card them. Mm-hmm. So that was the system. You just did it.
Yeah, well,
you don't have to do it full time.
Ian and I talk about this all the time. I'm still figuring out systems. Like the warehouse is just littered with projects of things I need to do. And finally, we got a bunch of shitty shelves from this collection that we put in the other room. And I just decided these are my project shelves. Every time I wander across a box of stuff, oh, these need to be sorted. And if I sort them, I could sell them. Oh, these are pieces for a future art show. Oh, these are, resin masters to send to China once this project is done. Oh, these are things I have to close out. I need to sell it. Whatever it is, everything goes on these shelves.
Yeah.
Right. And all of these, and now I know where things go, but it's taken me 20 fucking years to figure out that I need this room with all these shelves.
Right.
To
well,
really
it's you can't, it's the dumb motivational poster shit, right? But you can't see the forest through the trees. That's exactly what it is. So when you're surrounded by all of the stuff, it's impossible to, where do I start? Where's the project? So you're taking the projects, you're cutting that tree down, you're putting it at the factory, and you're going to turn it into a table. Or a Darth Vader. Boba Fett.
It's brutal.
It's so weird to me that this is things I'm learning now. And I will say I'm very lucky, because my boss is an incredible person, and he's like, I'm going to be a life coach as well as your boss. Like, so I'm learning all this stuff.
But he's an accountant also? He's
a CPA, but he wants to do more. Like, we're moving towards more of this sort of like coaching and working with small businesses to help them be successful, and not just, just doing your books. Like, that's the way we're moving.
I mean, most accountants I've ever met are just like,
he's not most accountants. He moved to New York to be an actor, and then was like, that didn't work. My dad's an accountant. I'll be an accountant. I'm really good at it. And he's incredible at it. But so he's finding how to leverage his gifts. But he's real big on the work-life balance thing. Like, he yells at me if I work too late. His goal is to have a 32-hour work week within 2 years. Like, these are the things we're working towards with him. So I realize that I'm very lucky in my job.
Dude, if I could work 32 hours, like, I get to 32 hours in 3 days.
Get an implementer, man.
Get an implementer.
Yeah, I don't know how we derailed from toys into talking about freaking Donald Miller business theories, but yeah,
I don't know what I think it pertains, and I think it's I think everyone who watches this, who's an artist, who cares, who's creating something, can identify, which sort of leads into people who always tell me that they want to make a toy but have stopped. We talked to Manny Romero yesterday, and he's sort of stopped making toys. And actually, there's a bunch of people. So you've sort of stopped in a way. We're going to talk to Falcon Toys, who's stopped.
I just took a break. I came to run your conventions instead of
right. I mean, everyone's like, whatever you want to call it, like on hiatus. Everyone does something every once in a while.
Rumspringa. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they're not putting out a, you know, something new every month. You know, it's like, oh, I'll put something out, I'll participate in this project, but that's once a year, or, you know,
At the end of the day, there's only one resource that matters at all, and that's time. And unfortunately, money is what frees up time, but time is the only resource that actually matters. So when like the Keanu's are a really good example of a project that I am incredibly proud of. That's one of my favorite things I've ever made. And that's what pushed me out for a while, because of the amount of time that it took to do that and the repetitiveness. And then my own dumb ego at the end of the project, when Mark Todd turns in these incredible pieces of art for the card back, and then everybody talks about how great the Mark Todd pieces are, and no one says how great the Janky's pieces are. And Janky goes home and has his feelings hurt for a while and has to reevaluate why I do things, you know.
Right.
And look, those pieces wouldn't be what they are without Mark Todd. Like that was a great collaboration on pieces. I didn't realize how big an ego blow it was going to be to not get recognized for it, and so I had to take some time to think about that, you know.
You could look at it that way, but you could also look at it like what you gained from a partnership with Mark Todd.
Absolutely. And that's where I sort of came out on, right?
I mean, the problem is that's just sort of intangible.
Right.
But for your resume, for your oeuvre, you know, and body of work, you know, that's
right.
You know.
Well, and to work with a person who has changed my artistic point of view in ways that I can't even describe. I mean, there's a handful of artists who changed the way I look at art, and Mark is undoubtedly at the top of that list. You know, Wayne White, Mark Todd, Alex Pardee, Ryan Heshka, like these guys have changed how I look at art, you know, and so to have the opportunity to work with him and to have him invest like the amount of talent and creativity that he didn't half-ass those cards. He thought about it. Like he really created this perfect, wonderful card for them, you know? And so it's a huge honor to be a part of that project with him. But you know, like I said, I'm a narcissist at heart. I'm well-intentioned, but you know, so I had to process that.
I think the people who didn't recognize your contribution didn't know you.
Probably.
If they saw it on Mark Todd's feed and it said, you know, this Mark Todd and Janky Toys, they just know Mark Todd. Like that's it's not a slight against you. Everyone who knows you and sees that, like, oh, there's a set of Keanu figures, like from like with my own private Idaho, and like
this is the most janky thing I've ever seen. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that is you.
Right. No, 100%. And I'm, like I said, I'm incredibly proud of those figures. And I'm so grateful to Mark that he'd be willing to do something with, he didn't know who I was. I mean, and you brokered that deal, and the pieces turned out, I mean, like I said, those 5 pieces together is one of the best things I've ever made. And it wouldn't exist that way without his contribution.
Right. It's amazing to me, which I've always said, is how those 5 pieces needed to be done all together
at one time. Yeah.
And that any one of them on its own would have been not the same.
Just a weird Keanu Reeves toy, as opposed to it was a bigger, and we talked about this when I pitched the idea to you. It's a bigger concept piece. There had to be 5 of them.
Right.
And you actually guided that to the direction it was. There was a slightly different idea originally, and you helped shape it. And you've always been really good about that with me, where I'll come to you with something. The first exclusive I did with you, I came to you and said, I want to do a severed limb. And you said, what else you got? Because you knew that I was going to run that damn idea into the ground.
It's not.
And so instead I gave you a Nicolas Cage Quantum Leap mashup that nobody asked for, but
which found their home.
All of them sold. Yeah. I love that piece too.
And then I ended up getting a few back somehow in a collection or something, and all of them sold.
All of them sold. Yeah.
But the thing about the severed limbs and what DKE can provide for an artist is a platform and promotion.
Right.
And so it's my opinion, and I'm not always right, but is that if you come here with another version of the thing that you always do, it's not going to get that much attention.
Right.
Like, this is the place where you want to try something you've never done before.
Right. Well,
right?
and as an artist sort of starting out, you don't think that way. You think this was successful, I need to ride this train. And it takes someone with experience and compassion to say, there's other options. Like
Right.
you can grow as an artist through this experience, which is exactly what you did with me. And you let me make some really weird shit. Like when I said I want to do Mexican bootleg Pee Wee Herman, you're like, yeah, cool, go for it. It's like, why not?
But that's exciting to me, right? That's something totally new, like no one has ever seen that.
Right.
And so are there things that we're selling even today that, you know, are a little odd and not finding their place right now? Possibly, but all of it sells eventually. I've had very few pieces that artists have like taken back. Usually artists leave stuff with us. We always ask artists to, you know, consider leaving the stuff with us for a year, for a full year of shows. Most people just leave the stuff with us until they're actually gone. And we're usually committed to selling them until they're gone. But the sleeper hits, you know, we'll know better in 10 or 20 years, but the sleeper hits are always going to be the stuff that people really didn't pay attention to that much.
Right. I agree. I totally agree. I like, look, Caterpillar's Charles Barkley Godzilla piece.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody slept on that. I think in 15 years, people are going to look at that and be like, this is bananas. What was this?
Right.
I love it. I love those ones that slide under the radar.
I mean, there's, you know, we have this piece from Lily Todd, right? This ceramic piece. It's $100. It's like
incredible.
A lot of people don't know what to make of it, but how old is she? 18, 19? You know, it's like she just started college. Like, just wait 10 years from now. Wait till, you know, this is like her rookie card. You know what I mean? It's so I'm not one for gambling, but I think you should buy the stuff that you like. But I definitely think that, I mean, look at the Sucklord 66, right? That, aside from Cause Toys, that's the one toy that came out for the Sucklord in 2004. It was 40 bucks. And as far as value, it sells for at least $1,000, right? So it's at least 25 times its original release price.
Right.
That took a while to get there. That's the holy grail for a lot of people. There are holy grails sitting on this table.
100%.
Something else has to happen. Right. The person who's making a toy is going to go on to do something else. And this is going to be, I found something that Sarah has. Sarah has this little Walt Disney resin figure in an ice block that Track 16 Gallery released. And it's signed by 2 artists. And they're sold out now. But it turns out one of the guys who made them is like the guy who created SpongeBob.
Huh.
Right. And so it's like, I was just cleaning up her stuff and I found the box, and she has it on display. She's had it on display for, 15 years. And I don't know what it was when it came out. It's like 50 bucks. Now they sell them for like 500 or 1,000. But it's like, you know what I mean? It's like something is going to happen. There's going to be that thing that right now seems cool, but is going to, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite pieces in my collection is my wife and I, when we got married in 2008, commissioned Mike Levitt to make our cake topper.
Wow.
And it's me as the Incredible Hulk and her looking up, rolling her eyes at me. And he was just making cake toppers. He'd done like a little bit of the artist series, but nothing big yet,
Wow.
And it wasn't cheap. I think we paid $500, which is a lot for a cake topper, but we knew this is sort of a sentimental piece. Sure. And now he's blown up to be who he is. And when he put out his book 2 years ago, our cake topper has a full page in the freaking book. You
That's
never know.
amazing.
You just buy the things you like and trust that your taste and your instinct is right, and you never know what it's gonna turn into. So,
and I think for most of this stuff that is very relatively inexpensive, it seems, I'm just telling the people out there, it seems expensive here's this item for $50. That's a lot of money.
Especially when you're used to buying toys for $20 at Target or $15 at, yeah, whatever. Yeah, totally.
But related to the exponential growth of what art does once it gets into like the, if you look at the Sucklords work and you think, or Killer Bootlegs, like their work seems expensive, right? When it's in the $100 or $200 range, or if they're doing individual pieces, 300, 400, 500. That's nothing compared to what it would be if they become household names.
Right.
If this
absolutely,
if this movement explodes, like those are all $10,000 and $20,000 pieces of art.
Right.
And again, I don't want people to buy this stuff for the value, but it sure is nice to know at least it's not the same as like if you blew all your money on like meth and
I mean, it depends on the piece, I guess. I mean, we've talked about this many times, both on the air and off, but the year that that Killer released Phantom Star Killer, I was at your booth debating, do I buy this piece, which is really cool, or do I buy the Mike Egan Hulk painting? And financially, I probably made the wrong decision because I didn't buy Phantom Star Killer and I did buy the Egan Hulk. But for me, I bought the right piece. And I love, I wish I had a Phantom Star Killer. I'm not saying I don't love that piece, but for me in my collection, I bought the piece that really spoke to me in the moment. But that was the right thing to do.
It's not too far off because the Phantom Star Killer is probably worth $500, right? And while Mike's piece was originally, how much were they? $100? $75?
I think I paid 75, yeah.
75, like his work is still going up, and a piece that size is still at least $200, $300. So as far as, if you want to commodify,
it's all good
like
investment, but just buy what you love. That's what it comes down to. Buy the things that you want to have in your collection, and maybe they get worth more, and then maybe you sell that collection back to Dove for 50 cents on the dollar. Who knows?
But I spent most of the pandemic this last year having this insane FOMO, or whatever you call it, when watching things that I just snubbed my nose at selling for. I mean, that's been the whole entire pandemic for me, watching Magic the Gathering cards, sell
Pokemon
for,
turn in,
watching a Pokemon card sell for $500,000. Now, I was never into Pokemon, and never appealed to me, but when Michael Jordan rookies, and I had 2 of them, and I paid $3 each for them, and I'm sure they were not 10s, right? But 10s are selling for $700,000 consistently, like not like fluke, like consistently. And I probably had an 8 or a 9, which is probably somewhere between $5,000 and $50,000. And it's like, I had 2 of them, and it was awesome. I bought them for $3, and I probably sold them for 300. But watching that stuff, that things that I had just exponentially just go through the roof. And the video games, I was never that into video games, but watching a sealed Mario Brothers graded cartridge sell for $400,000 and just losing my fucking mind. Like they were just right there. It's like, because what it indicates to me is like this failure to recognize the trends, and I'm sort of just like in my lane and focusing on what but
that was a trend you couldn't predict, like, because cards fell off a cliff, right? Cards were dead, and then all of a sudden they massively exploded again, and it's going to die again at some point. They're going to fall off a cliff again, and then it's going to ebb and flow, and
they died.
It's all fetish property, right? Like,
I mean, they died. Maybe, I don't know. They died in an era of overproduction. The vintage stuff never died, and the high grade stuff, which is really what is performing. What's happening is the mid range stuff is sort of just keeping, up with. So there's a card that there's 50,000 of them out there, right? But in this, pristine condition, there's only 500, and there's more than 500 billionaires who all want, Michael Jordan rookie, and so those start to separate from the pack. you know, yeah, some things will settle down. I have an Atom Bomb graded 10 that I felt stupid paying $500 for, but I did it because I wanted it, you know.
Right. For obvious reasons.
And then one sold for $30,000 and then one sold for $29,000. And I was like, nah, you know, it's like score, right? But then you see, like, then someone listed at 24, not selling 20, and they're sort of settled down to 15. But still, I mean, I'm happy, like,
right.
But it's a very common card to be worth that much money. But I don't know.
But and then there's the collector's disease part, right? Like, I had a Walking Dead #1 that I bought because a friend of mine, a rapper named MC Frontalot, was friends with Tony Moore, who did the art. He said, hey, this book's coming out, go support my friend. So I went and bought it. And then immediately it sold out, and then it was this giant freaking thing, right? And so when I purged most of my comic book collection, I kept going back and forth on, do I sell this Walking Dead #1? It's a very volatile book. It goes up and down like crazy. And part of my argument for not selling it was, I own a Walking Dead #1. You own a 10 Atom Bomb, you know? And my wife's like, dude, you paid $3 for that. You can get $1,200 for it. Why aren't you selling it? Like, and because I had, this is just for me, I had to have I had to find a line, right? And the line was, if I'm not collecting it anymore and I don't care anymore, I'm not going to be able to put my daughter through school on Walking Dead #1. That ship sailed. Though nature hates a vacuum, and there aren't any super valuable modern books, and that probably will be the more valuable modern book. But
well, because the Walking Dead's kind of at a low point now, and it's going to be finished, so it's going to fall out of favor. But
and
then
at some point it'll
10, 15 years, there'll be a reboot or something will happen, and then it, like, you know, the people who can't, it takes about 20 years, I think. There's this little incubation period. So it's like people who were like in high school and they were watching it, and then by the time they're like 40 and they make some money, and then they have some, you know,
the nostalgia factor kicks in.
Yeah, if we have a planet by then you know,
right. I was gonna say, that's a pretty big bet.
you know, it's like, if civilization still exists, you know, 20 years from now, is that, you know, $1,200 book, is it going to be worth 5 or 10,000? Probably. But what else could you do with that 1,200 in the meantime?
Well, and that was what it came, and it was something I didn't love, you know, like, but like I said, at the end of the day, just buy the stuff you like, support the people you love, and hope that becomes worth something. But I think I went way over my time here at this rant.
And especially support them if they make resin toys,
for sure, and they sell them at DKE.
Right. All right, sir.
The one, actually, let me say one last little thing before we go, because I know I've gone way over my time. But for the newer artists who are coming into the scene, because there's a lot of them, which I think is amazing, and we're seeing, I think because of DKECON, we've seen this uptick in new people coming and putting out work. The most valuable thing you can do as an artist is to build a genuine creative circle of people that you trust and love. I've got Scott and Dove as like my 2 main sounding boards, and I'm incredibly lucky to have you guys, because you'll tell me when I'm full of shit. You'll tell me when an idea isn't good, and you'll tell me when an idea is good and I should pursue it. And so I just wanted to throw that little nugget. Like, I think the most important thing you can do as a creator is to build a genuine circle of creators that you trust, that will give you that feedback.
I think the key word is genuine, because in general, you know, most people around you, they want something from you that just will tell you, oh, it's great, you know, just to, I don't know why, and then there's another group of people that are insanely jealous that want to tear you down. So actually finding people who will tell you your shit stinks when it actually does is
it's pretty crucial. And it's hard to do. But, you know, I'm lucky. You know, like I said, I'm so grateful for you and for Scott, Tony, who I was talking about. He's one of my creative circle, and all three of you will tell me when it's like, this is bad. This is not a good idea. Like, do it if you want to do it, but it's not a good idea, you know. And as an artist, we need to hear that. And look, if we decide we want to do it anyway, that's great. But we got the feedback from people we trust that maybe that's not the path to go down, or maybe this idea that we're not sold on is actually really killer and there's something we can do with it.
And sometimes we're just wrong.
Yeah, usually. I'm just kidding.
Well, on that note, Thank you so much.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate
I'm
it.
grateful for you. Everybody's out. I love this community. I love everybody. Sorry I don't make toys lately, but DKECON, look, there's something coming.
Nice. All right, man. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, guys.
That was fantastic. Janky, says Magoob.